In 1986, a security transport vehicle carrying $2.1 million in cash disappeared without warning from the streets of Cincinnati, Ohio, sparking a mystery that would endure for decades. The driver was presumed dead, and the trail went cold. No leads, no suspects, and no resolution. But 37 years later, a completely unrelated event would lead to the unraveling of one of the city's longest-standing unsolved crimes. It began with a quiet death and a long-forgotten artifact, tucked away beneath a layer of dust and time. A map, a single line of handwritten instruction, 4:48 sharp, come alone. What started as innocent curiosity quickly evolved into a shocking rediscovery. The case of the vanished cash truck was about to open again. On the morning of October 3, 1986, in Cincinnati, Ohio, a specialized security transport truck belonging to the Merchant Bank of Hamilton County failed to arrive at its scheduled final destination. The vehicle, a reinforced armored unit designed to carry high-value deposits between bank branches, was operated that day by 41-year-old Thomas Drexel, a veteran employee with over 12 years in the field. By all accounts, Thomas was dependable, routine-oriented, quiet, and professionally meticulous. That particular Friday was not meant to be anything out of the ordinary. The transport run had been mapped out in advance, plotted across 6 banking locations, covering a 17-mile circuit throughout the city. The final delivery was set to reach the bank's main operations hub downtown by 5:10 p.m. Each leg of the route had been logged with specific timestamps, all part of the company's standard security procedures. But the first irregularity presented itself almost immediately. Thomas Drexel was driving alone. This violated protocol. Bank regulations require that all high-cash transports be conducted with 2 crew members present at all times, 1 driver, 1 security operator. The protocol had been established years earlier following a series of regional robberies. Yet exceptions, while rare, were not unheard of. On that morning, Thomas's partner, a younger guard named Lucas Rourke, reportedly called in sick just before 7 a.m., citing an intense stomach flu. Due to a scheduling conflict and limited staff availability, operations management reluctantly approved Thomas to proceed solo. The risk was noted in the internal log, but not flagged for override. Efficiency won out over caution. Throughout the day, Thomas checked in via radio at each stop, his voice steady and consistent. Transaction logs were updated in real time, verified by the dispatch team monitoring his progress. Every withdrawal and deposit was accounted for. At 4:42 p.m., Thomas radioed in from the 5th stop, 2 blocks south of a meatpacking district on the city's eastern edge. The dispatch record marked it as uneventful. The next stop, his final delivery, was a short 7-minute drive west. He never made it. By 5:15 p.m., with no sign of the vehicle at headquarters and no radio response from Drexel, the bank's logistics division escalated the matter. A full-scale alert was issued to the Cincinnati Police Department by 5:22 p.m. By 5:38, units were deployed. The route was retraced, starting from the last known location, sweeping block by block. The search stretched into the night. Police canvassed the truck's known pathway, extending outwards in concentric circles. Industrial areas, alleys, service roads, all examined with precision. No debris, no damage, no witnesses. By midnight, the vehicle was declared missing. The city's infrastructure in 1986 lacked the surveillance coverage we take for granted today. Traffic cameras were limited to only a few intersections downtown, none of which fell along Thomas Drexel's planned route. There was no digital tracking on the armored vehicle, no GPS, no panic button. Investigators were flying blind. Multiple theories quickly emerged: a hijacking, a targeted ambush, a planned disappearance. Law enforcement considered the possibility that Thomas Drexel either had been taken by force or had voluntarily vanished. Investigators began by examining Drexel's personal life. His financial record showed no unexplained activity. No debts, no gambling, no recent large purchases. His wife and teenage daughter described him as cautious, borderline obsessive about order. No signs of personal stress, no unexplained absences, nothing to suggest he was planning anything out of the ordinary. Attention then shifted to his sick partner, Lucas Rourke. Investigators secured medical records and confirmed his admittance to a local clinic that morning. Rourke had been seen, examined, and discharged with a documented case of gastroenteritis. Interviews with medical staff confirmed his presence from morning until early evening. Surveillance at the clinic's entrance confirmed the timeline. Rourke was cleared. Investigators extended their scope outwards. They interviewed bank staff, route schedulers, dispatch personnel. They traced every interaction Drexel had in the 48 hours leading up to his disappearance. They looked for patterns, for clues, anything unusual. They found nothing. With no physical evidence, no eyewitness accounts, and no recovered vehicle, the case fell into limbo. Over the weeks that followed, dozens of tips came in. Sightings of the armored truck, rumors about Drexel fleeing to Mexico, allegations of organized crime, all investigated, all false. By February of 1987, 5 months after the vehicle vanished with $2.1 million inside, Thomas Drexel was declared legally deceased. His family held a private memorial. The bank submitted its losses to insurance. The police department moved the file to cold storage. But the story didn't die. For years, Cincinnati residents whispered about the heist. Radio shows debated Drexel's guilt or innocence. Tabloids speculated about his fate, whether he was buried under concrete or sipping bourbon on a beach under a new name. The armored truck mystery became local folklore, passed down with each retelling, colored by suspicion and doubt. Yet none of it led anywhere. No new evidence, no recovered funds, no trace of Thomas Drexel. The story faded, drifting further into myth, until one spring afternoon in 2023, over 300 miles away in a quiet suburb of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a retired man's death set in motion a chain of events that would revive the entire case and expose the truth that had been buried for nearly 4 decades. In April 2023, 72-year-old Everett Langley died unexpectedly in his Harrisburg home, the result of an aneurysm that struck while he was watering his backyard garden. Langley had lived a quiet, respectable life, an Air Force veteran turned logistics consultant, known for his meticulous habits and solitary nature. He left behind no spouse, no children, only a younger brother named Warren and a small group of neighbors who remembered him fondly but distantly. His home, a modest 2-story house on a wooded cul-de-sac, had remained largely untouched for years. After the funeral, Warren took on the task of sorting through Everett's belongings. Most of it was standard: tax documents, manuals for outdated electronics, crates of books, boxes of military memorabilia. But in the lowest corner of the basement, buried beneath layers of toolboxes and bundled tarp, Warren discovered a plastic storage container marked only with tape that read "Personal." Inside, nestled among yellowed papers and a rusting compass, lay a folded transit map, creased and faded, its corners stained dark with what appeared to be axle grease. The map was centered not on Harrisburg or even Pennsylvania, but on an industrial section of Cincinnati, Ohio. At first, Warren didn't understand what he was looking at. The streets were unfamiliar, the handwriting cryptic, but one thing stood out: a set of red notations etched along a winding route through the warehouse district. The markings resembled the path of a service vehicle, annotated with times, arrows, and names of side streets. Beside a specific intersection, Clybourne Avenue and Mathers Alley, a message was scrawled in blocky, ink-faded letters: 448. Come alone. Do not call ahead. It meant nothing to Warren, but something about it, its secrecy, its placement, felt important. He took a photo and entered the intersection into a search engine. At first, nothing stood out. An old rail yard, a shuttered meat processing facility, a parking garage. But then, buried in a historical news archive,
He found an article from 1986 titled "Armored Truck Vanishes with Over $2 Million. Driver Feared Dead." As he read on, the hair on the back of his neck stood up. The disappearance had taken place less than 300 yards from the very intersection marked on Everett's map. The timestamp, 4:48 p.m., matched the moment when radio contact was lost with driver Thomas Drexel. The coincidence was too precise, too pointed. Warren sat back in stunned silence, staring at the decades-old document that now looked more like a blueprint to a ghost story. He dug further. Public archives showed no record of Everett Langley ever living or working in Cincinnati. His career was officially rooted in regional transportation planning, first with the Air Force, then with various civilian contractors around Pennsylvania and Maryland. But in one personnel listing from 1986, Warren found a single line that raised a red flag. Langley had been assigned to a temporary consulting contract with a private waste management firm headquartered in Cincinnati. The dates, August to October of that year. Exactly the period when the armored truck vanished. Warren's hands trembled as he pulled the map back out of the container, now seeing it for what it might be. Evidence. Not memorabilia, not keepsake, evidence. Instead of alerting police, Warren sought out private help. He wanted answers, quietly, and he needed someone who could separate fiction from fact. He was referred to Marla Vexler, a retired federal investigator turned private researcher known for her discretion and cold case experience. Vexler agreed to take the case on a provisional basis, curious about the unusual document. Within 2 weeks, she had turned up enough information to confirm Warren's suspicions. Everett Langley had a history with logistics firms operating near the banking sector in the Midwest. Though not formally listed as an employee of any waste management company, he had subcontracted as a route systems analyst during the exact period in question. Vexler filed Freedom of Information requests, pulled microfiche records, traced vehicle registrations, and located city contracts. One name surfaced again and again in old municipal logs from 1986, Western Waste Solutions, a private refuse contractor servicing industrial districts on the eastern side of Cincinnati. Langley's name appeared in multiple work orders as a route consultant. More importantly, city records showed that a garbage truck registered to Western Waste had experienced a breakdown at 4:35 p.m. on October 3, 1986, on Clybourne Avenue, directly at the location marked on Langley's map. The truck's incident log claimed a hydraulic malfunction. A work order listed it as non-operational for less than an hour before being towed and later returned to service. But no maintenance records ever corroborated the claim. The truck was retired from service weeks later. Vexler tracked down the junkyard where it had been dismantled. Its original tow manifest was gone. Its compactor unit had been crushed and sold for scrap in 1987. It was enough to warrant deeper attention. She turned her attention to Everett Langley's past. Using military records, she traced his enlistment and discovered a significant connection. During the Vietnam War, Langley had served in the same battalion as a man named Richard Carver. Carver, it turned out, had lived in Cincinnati from 1983 to 1987. His listed employment? A technician for Western Waste Solutions. When Vexler ran Carver's financial history, the pattern echoed eerily. Modest income before 1986, followed by a sudden purchase of a large rural property in Kentucky in 1987, paid in full, in cash. She reached out to Warren. She didn't want to alarm you, but it looks like your brother may have been part of something very calculated. She assembled a preliminary report, one that outlined Langley's consulting work, the location of the garbage truck breakdown, the map with the precise time and location of the armored truck's disappearance, and the connection to Carver. The pieces fit. Too cleanly, too precisely. Vexler knew what had to happen next. She compiled the findings into a confidential file and brought it to the attention of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. And just like that, after 37 dormant years, The disappearance of Thomas Drexel and $2.1 million in cash was reopened as an active investigation.
The cold case team at the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation wasted no time. Armed with Wexler's report, they reopened File 86-3107, the Drexel disappearance, and began cross-referencing details that had once seemed meaningless. This time, with names, financials, and locations in hand, everything began to shift. Detective Alan Phelps, a seasoned investigator with a reputation for dogged attention to detail, was assigned to the case. He'd worked unsolved homicides, missing persons, and interstate fraud, but this, an armored truck heist buried under 3 decades of silence, was unlike anything he'd seen. His first move was to build a profile on Richard Carver. Born in 1949, Carver had enlisted in the Army at 18 and served 2 tours in Vietnam. After returning stateside, his work history was scattered: construction jobs, short-term contracts, and finally a low-profile position at Western Waste Solutions. Public records confirmed his residence in Cincinnati from 1983 to late 1986, followed by a sudden relocation to rural Meade County, Kentucky. There, Carver purchased a 25-acre property with 2 outbuildings and a mobile home, paid entirely in cash. No mortgage, no lien, no known inheritance. When Phelps visited the property under a pretext, he noted the remote location, woods dense enough to disappear into. Carver, now 74, answered the door wearing a faded work jacket and a distant expression. His eyes held wariness, but not surprise. He invited Phelps inside, but offered little more than pleasantries. When asked about Everett Langley, Carver blinked once, then replied that he hadn't seen him in over 30 years. "Old Army buddy," he said. "Drifted apart. Happens." Phelps didn't push. He wasn't here to accuse. Yet. He logged every detail: Carver's careful tone, the quick but cautious answers, and the slight twitch at the mention of Cincinnati. On the wall behind him hung a framed photograph of young soldiers in uniform, squinting against sun and smoke. Langley stood among them. The next step was deeper. Phelps pulled full financial records. Carver's tax filings in 1986 showed an annual income of just under $18,000. But by early 1987, deposits of untraceable cash began appearing in irregular intervals. Never enough to draw suspicion, always just under the threshold that required bank reporting. Property records showed purchases of tools, a backhoe, and 2 secondary vehicles in the span of 6 months, all in cash. At the same time, Phelps secured a search warrant for the Langley residence. With the family's cooperation, a forensic team combed through the basement. The map was collected and analyzed. Chemical testing revealed traces of oxidized copper, along with particles linked to reinforced rubber. Tire tread residue, possibly from heavy industrial equipment, was faint but present on the paper's edge. Lab results later confirmed the ink was manufactured between 1984 and 1987, matching the window of the crime. But the breakthrough came from an unexpected place. In a long-forgotten archive, a city maintenance log recorded an unscheduled repair to a storm drain near the Clybourne Avenue and Mathers Alley, dated October 6, 1986, 3 days after the disappearance. The notes listed metallic blockage and referenced cleanup of foreign debris. No photographs were attached, no samples preserved. Phelps cross-referenced utility maps. The storm drain ran beneath a small turnoff alley, precisely where the garbage truck had reportedly broken down. The possibility emerged. Could the armored truck have been disposed of in parts and funneled through infrastructure designed to hide refuse? They brought in a structural consultant who confirmed that during the 1980s, several access tunnels beneath that district connected directly to waste transfer points. It would have been plausible, though difficult, for a heavy object like a stripped vehicle chassis to be dumped into the system with the help of hydraulic lifts or compactors. The garbage truck, with its size and compactor, would have provided the perfect cover. But without physical remains, it remained theory. Phelps turned his attention to what could be proved: money. He requested cooperation from the Treasury Department's Financial Crimes Division. Working backward from Carver's purchases, they identified a pattern of serial numbers tied to the 1986 merchant bank deposits. Although serial logs were incomplete, a partial series of bills was recovered from a cash transaction at a used equipment auction in 1987. One bill matched a serial number from the missing transport manifest. Another, from the same batch, had resurfaced in Kentucky, used in a property tax payment. These links were enough to secure a federal warrant. On June 19, 2023, authorities executed a coordinated search of Carver's property. Inside a locked cabinet in a shed behind the main home, they discovered ledgers, old spiral notebooks with coded notations, dates, amounts, initials. Several entries aligned with the known timeline of Drexel's disappearance. In a fireproof box buried beneath floorboards, investigators found a rusted dog tag, etched with the name T. Drexel. DNA testing would later confirm it belonged to Thomas Drexel's military-issue ID tag, which he reportedly carried out of habit, though not required in his civilian job. Carver was taken into custody without incident. He spoke only once as he was led from his property in handcuffs. Told Everett it would never stay buried. At headquarters, Carver invoked his right to remain silent. Over 3 days of questioning, he offered nothing further. But Phelps wasn't finished. With the pieces now forming a credible narrative, financial evidence, DNA-linked items, map coordinates, matching timelines, and a deceased conspirator, Phelps petitioned for a posthumous indictment of Everett Langley and prepared charges of conspiracy, armed robbery, and homicide against Richard Carver. The state was ready to proceed. By late summer 2023, preparations were underway for what would become one of Ohio's most highly scrutinized cold case prosecutions in decades. Richard Carver stood accused of participating in a meticulously orchestrated armored truck heist that left one man dead and $2.1 million missing for nearly 40 years. Though the robbery itself could no longer be prosecuted due to statute limitations, the homicide and cover-up remained fair ground. At the heart of the case was the man no longer alive to face justice, Everett Langley. The prosecution's theory, supported by physical evidence and circumstantial detail, painted Langley as the operation's architect, the planner, the observer, the insider who had used his role as a route consultant to study Drexel's movements and identify vulnerabilities. Carver, they argued, was the executor, hands-on, methodical, and loyal to his wartime friend. The grand jury reviewed a case file that stretched over 900 pages. Forensic reports, satellite maps, photographs of the basement map, financial ledgers, and DNA results, all backed by testimony from experts and the investigative team. On September 2nd, Carver was formally indicted on 4 counts: conspiracy to commit homicide, second-degree murder, abuse of a corpse, and obstruction of justice. Carver remained silent throughout. His court-appointed attorney, a seasoned defense lawyer named Glenn Masterson, declined to pursue an insanity defense, instead focusing on procedural angles. He argued the age of the evidence and the absence of a recovered body rendered the case speculative, asserting that the state lacked definitive proof of Drexel's death. But the prosecution had one final piece to reveal. During a secondary search of Carver's home, agents had recovered a cassette tape, unmarked, wedged inside a false panel of an antique desk. The audio was old, degraded, but partially salvageable. A voice, confirmed through analysis as Langley's, narrated what appeared to be a personal account. It was fragmented, incomplete, but damning. "We weren't supposed to use force. It got messy. Tom panicked, wouldn't get out of the truck.
Rick lost his temper. Wasn't planned that way. He didn't suffer. The tape abruptly cut out, but its implications were clear. Langley had not only confirmed Drexel's death, but implied Carver had delivered the fatal blow. The tape, paired with the dog tag, the map, and the financial records, established the motive, the method, and the aftermath. Faced with the inevitability of conviction, Carver requested to speak privately with prosecutors. What followed was a proffer session, an informal interview in which the defendant offers information in exchange for potential leniency. Carver confessed. His account corroborated nearly every aspect of Wexler's findings, but it added texture, emotional nuance, and disturbing clarity to the events of October 3, 1986. Langley had approached him in the spring of that year, armed with maps, bank delivery schedules, and a theory. Drexel's route intersected a vulnerable industrial corridor every Friday afternoon. It was an area where garbage trucks, freight haulers, and construction rigs moved without suspicion. The security protocols were strict but exploitable. Langley had verified through a contact that Drexel's regular partner often called out due to recurring health issues. The plan was brutally simple. Langley would position the garbage truck at a bend in Cleburne Avenue, simulating a breakdown. Carver, dressed in a sanitation worker's vest and gloves, would wait beside a stack of emptied bins. As Drexel slowed, thinking he was approaching a routine obstruction, Langley would flag him down. Carver would move in from the blind side. It was supposed to be non-violent. We'd scare him, tie him up, dump the truck, leave him somewhere safe. But he fought. According to Carver, Drexel recognized Langley, perhaps from a prior route or casual encounter, and panicked. He attempted to radio dispatch. Carver reacted instinctively, striking him once, hard, with the edge of a tire iron. He didn't get up. The body was wrapped in a tarp and loaded into the garbage truck's compactor. Langley activated the lift, burying the remains beneath a load of collected waste from that morning's route. Hours later, the truck emptied its contents at a municipal landfill that had since been permanently capped and converted into commercial property. The money, stuffed into commercial-grade trash bags, was transferred to Langley's personal vehicle and driven out of the city. The armored truck was stripped in a leased garage, then its frame cut and disposed of piece by piece over the following weeks. Langley and Carver divided the money. Neither made lavish purchases. They paid off debts, acquired modest properties, and disappeared into quiet lives. They never spoke again. The prosecution agreed to a revised plea. Carver would serve 16 years for his role in the homicide and disposal of the body. Given his age, it was effectively a life sentence. On October 18, 2023, Richard Carver stood in a Franklin County courtroom as the charges were read aloud. He offered no apology, only a nod of acknowledgement. The court accepted the plea. The sentence was imposed without fanfare. That same week, the state issued a formal, posthumous indictment for Everett Langley. Though symbolic, it served as an official recognition of his role in the crime. For Thomas Drexel's family, it marked the end of a 37-year silence. His wife, now in her 70s, received the long-withheld truth that his husband had not vanished, had not run, but had been murdered in the line of duty. She was handed his recovered dog tag by Detective Phelps, a moment that silenced the room. No body was ever recovered. The landfill where Drexel's remains were believed to be buried had long been sealed. Efforts to excavate were deemed too dangerous and unlikely to yield results. The site was instead declared a symbolic grave. A memorial plaque was installed there 6 months later. And the map, the grease-stained sheet that started it all, was submitted to the archives of the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. It remains preserved in a sealed evidence case, a reminder of how a single overlooked artifact can unlock the past.
The final chapter of the Thomas Drexel case unfolded not in a courtroom, but in the quieter, less visible spaces where truth is reckoned with and legacy is measured, not in headlines, but in the silent weight of knowing. After the sentencing of Richard Carver and the formal indictment of Everett Langley, the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation issued a comprehensive report spanning over 1,200 pages. It detailed not only the known facts of the case, but the nearly invisible threads, faded contracts, abandoned leases, obsolete vehicle registries that had collectively formed the architecture of a perfect crime gone unsolved for nearly 4 decades. Among the report's more haunting revelations was the complete timeline reconstruction. Investigators confirmed that Langley had first begun analyzing armored vehicle routes as early as late 1985. Through his consulting role, he had access to municipal traffic flow data, sanitation routes, and cross-agency transit logs. No one had flagged it. His role had seemed too technical, too peripheral to warrant scrutiny. Langley's attention to detail bordered on obsessive. He logged weather patterns, average pedestrian traffic, alternate escape routes. He mapped the timing of red lights along Clybourne Avenue. He noted which streets were least likely to be manned by patrol units on Friday afternoons. He didn't just plan a robbery, he designed an absence. And for 37 years, it held. The report also clarified the financial aftermath. Of the $2.1 million stolen in 1986, only $47,300 was ever recovered, found through traced banknotes in Kentucky and Pennsylvania. The remainder had been spent, stored, or otherwise vanished without record. Neither Langley nor Carver had maintained large bank accounts. Both men lived below the radar, filing modest tax returns, avoiding digital footprints, and transacting largely in cash. They had laundered almost nothing, understanding instinctively that laundering left trails. Instead, they simply lived small. Everett Langley's Harrisburg property was appraised posthumously at just over $220,000. There were no safes, no offshore accounts, no hidden caches of money. If he had stashed more of the stolen funds, no evidence remained. Authorities issued a final determination. The heist proceeds were considered unrecoverable. For the Drexel family, the aftermath was bittersweet. Closure came not with relief, but with an ache that clarity cannot soften. They had buried hope decades ago, only to see it resurrected and reshaped into something darker, something final. Thomas's daughter, who had been 12 years old when he vanished, was now nearing 50. She gave a short, private statement through the family's attorney. "My father didn't run. He didn't betray us. He didn't take anything that wasn't his. He did his job, and someone took him away for that. We thank the investigators who never stopped looking." She declined interviews. The family had no plans to sue or seek further action. The Ohio State Attorney's Office issued an internal commendation to Marla Wexler for her role in initiating the breakthrough. She declined public recognition, stating only, "Sometimes the dead still speak. You just have to listen to the right echo." The final entry in the case file was the designation of a symbolic grave. On the southeastern edge of what was once the Elmsworth Municipal Landfill, now a chain-linked expanse of asphalt and low-rise industrial warehouses, an engraved stone marker was placed at the suggestion of the Drexel family. It reads, "In memory of Thomas Drexel, 1945 to 1986. He was never missing. We just didn't know where to look."
At the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's archive facility, the case folder was placed in a sealed evidence drawer with a unique classification tag, solved via posthumous discovery, a rare designation reserved for cases unraveled not by fresh crimes or new witnesses, but by the passage of time and the refusal to forget. The grease-stained map, now laminated and mounted on archival board, sits within that file. It remains the only direct artifact that connected the living to the truth. And for the city of Cincinnati, once haunted by whispers of a vanished man and vanished millions, it became a final, quiet answer. No shootouts, no Hollywood ending, just a garbage truck, a ghost route, and two men who thought the past could be compacted like refuse and buried forever. It wasn't, because time doesn't close a case. People do.